Today, I'm going to tell you the story of a schoolteacher from Boston who was kidnapped and put up for auction in a frontier town. Catherine Spencer never expected to find an unlikely savior in notorious gunslinger Wyatt Blackwood when she begged him not to participate in the horrifying bride sale. But what happened next left everyone in shock. Please subscribe to our channel and comment where you're listening to this story from. Devil's Crossing was the kind of town decent folk avoided. Perched on the edge of the Arizona territory like a vulture, it attracted men who preferred no questions about their past and no laws governing their future. Wyatt Blackwood had been to worse places, but not many. He tied his horse outside the saloon, dust from the street coating his black duster. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, but Wyatt barely noticed the heat anymore. 6 years in this desert had burned away any memory of cooler climes. "Whiskey," he told the barkeep, laying a coin on the scarred wood. "And information." The man eyed him warily, recognition dawning as he took in the twin Colts holstered at Wyatt's hips. "You're Blackwood." It wasn't a question. Wyatt didn't bother confirming what they both knew. "Silas Holcomb," Wyatt said instead. "Where do I find him?" The barkeep's hand trembled slightly as he poured the whiskey. "Mayor's office is across the square, but he won't be there now. Today's the auction." "Auction? Bride auction." The man lowered his voice. "Every few months Holcomb brings in a fresh batch of women, claims they're mail-order brides who agreed to frontier marriages." He snorted. "Everyone knows that's horseshit, but nobody asks questions." Something cold settled in Wyatt's gut. "Where?" "Yard behind the mercantile. Starts at 4. The barkeep glanced at the clock. "That's in 20 minutes. Wyatt downed his whiskey in one swallow and left without another word. He hadn't come to Devil's Crossing for any bride auction. He'd come for Holcomb, the man who'd ordered his brother's death. But now, it seemed, he had another reason to find the so-called mayor. The auction yard was already crowded when Wyatt arrived. Men from the town and surrounding ranches had gathered, drinking and laughing as they awaited the start. A wooden platform had been constructed at one end of the yard, with a canvas tent behind it. Wyatt positioned himself at the back of the crowd, hat pulled low. Better to observe first, learn the layout, find Holcomb. A portly man in an expensive suit climbed onto the platform, raising his hands for silence. The crowd gradually quieted. "Gentlemen of Devil's Crossing," he called out, his voice carrying across the yard. "Welcome to another fine selection of brides for your consideration." Must be Holcomb, Wyatt thought, studying the man's fleshy face and small, pig-like eyes. Different from the description he'd been given, but 6 years was a long time. People changed, grew fat on other people's misery. Now, these delicate flowers have traveled all the way from back east to find husbands in our fair territory, Holcomb continued, prompting laughter from the crowd. "They may be a bit reluctant at first. Travel can be so taxing on the feminine constitution. But I assure you, each one will make a fine, obedient wife with proper handling." More laughter, cruder this time. Wyatt's hand instinctively moved toward his gun before he caught himself. Not yet. He hadn't come this far to throw away his chance at justice for a bunch of women he didn't know. "Let's start the bidding at $50, Holcomb announced, gesturing toward the tent. "Bring out the first bride." 2 men dragged a young woman onto the platform. She couldn't have been more than 18, with blonde hair and a terrified expression. Her wrists were bound, and bruises darkened one side of her face. "This one's from Georgia," Holcomb declared. "Young, strong, and as you can see, quite pretty, despite her uncooperative nature." The bidding started immediately. Wyatt watched in disgust as the price climbed to $75, then $100. The girl seemed to shrink into herself as the men shouted their offers. When she was finally sold for $120 to a gray-bearded rancher, she was dragged off the platform, sobbing. Another woman was brought out. The process repeated. Wyatt scanned the yard, counting guards. 4 men with rifles positioned around the perimeter, 2 more flanking the platform, and Holcomb himself, who wore a pistol despite his fine clothes. 7 armed men total. By the time the 5th woman was brought out, Wyatt had formulated and discarded a dozen plans. None of them ended well for everyone involved, but he couldn't just stand by and watch this continue. The woman now on the platform was different from the others. Older, mid-20s perhaps, with auburn hair and the bearing of someone educated. Despite her bound hands and the visible bruises on her wrists and cheek, she held her head high, green eyes blazing with defiance. "This one's special, gentlemen," Holcomb announced, circling the woman like a predator. A genuine schoolteacher from Boston. Imagine the refinement she'll bring to your home. She can teach your brats to read and warm your bed at night. Crude laughter rippled through the crowd. The woman flinched, but didn't lower her gaze. Starting bid is $100, Holcomb declared. The bidding was fierce and quick. Men who had hesitated on previous women seemed eager for this one. The price jumped to $200, then $300. As the bidding continued, the woman's eyes scanned the crowd desperately. When her gaze landed on Wyatt, something changed in her expression. Perhaps it was the way he stood apart from the others, not participating in the bidding. Perhaps it was simple desperation. Wyatt found himself moving forward through the crowd, drawn by something he couldn't name. As he approached the platform, the woman's eyes never left his. $500, called a voice from the side. A well-dressed man with a cruel smile. $500 going once, Holcomb said, looking pleased. Please, the woman said suddenly, her voice clear despite its softness. Her eyes locked with Wyatt's. Please don't sell me. Time seemed to slow. In that moment, Wyatt saw something in her that reminded him of his brother's wife after they'd found his body. That same mixture of terror and determination. The same refusal to be broken. $500 going twice, Holcomb continued. Wyatt's hand moved to his gun. This auction's over, he said, his voice cutting through the excited murmurs of the crowd. Silence fell instantly. Holcomb squinted at him. Who the hell do you think you are, mister? Name's Wyatt Blackwood. Recognition flashed in Holcomb's eyes, followed quickly by fear. Blackwood? The gunslinger from the Reeves gang? Former, Wyatt corrected. Let the women go, Holcomb. The mayor's expression hardened. This is my town, Blackwood. Even with your reputation, you're outnumbered. Maybe. Wyatt's voice remained calm. But you'll be the first to die. The tension stretched like a bowstring pulled too tight. Wyatt could feel every eye in the yard on him. The woman on the platform stood perfectly still, barely breathing. There are easier ways to get a woman, Blackwood, Holcomb said finally, forcing a laugh. If you wanted this one, you just had to bid like everyone else. I don't want to buy her, Wyatt replied. I want you to let her go. Let them all go. Holcomb's smile disappeared. That's not how things work in Devil's Crossing. It is today. Holcomb glanced at his armed men who were shifting nervously. Wyatt Blackwood's reputation had spread far in these territories. Few men wanted to test whether the stories were exaggerated. $800, Holcomb said suddenly. You pay me $800 for this one, and you can take her wherever you please. Do whatever you want with her. That's not what Wyatt began, but the woman cut him off. I'll go with him, she said quickly. Please, I'll go quietly. Wyatt looked at her, surprised. She met his gaze steadily, a silent message in her eyes. Play along. $500, Wyatt countered, understanding dawning. That was the last bid. $700, Holcomb insisted. She's educated. Worth more. $600. Final offer. Holcomb studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Cash. Now. Wyatt reached into his coat, withdrawing a roll of bills. He counted out $600, nearly all the money he had, and tossed it onto the platform. Pleasure doing business, Holcomb said, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly as he retrieved the money. She's all yours. Take her and leave my town by sundown. Wyatt mounted the steps to the platform and approached the woman, who watched him warily despite her earlier words. Up close, the bruises on her face looked worse. What's your name? He asked quietly. Catherine, she replied, barely above a whisper. Catherine Spencer. Wyatt took out his knife and cut the ropes binding her wrists. She rubbed the raw skin, her eyes never leaving his face. I'm not what they think, he said softly, for her ears only. I won't hurt you. She nodded slightly, though fear still lingered in her eyes. I believe you, she whispered, but we need to leave. Now, before he changes his mind. Wyatt offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, Catherine took it. Together they descended from the platform and walked through the crowd, which parted silently before them. This isn't over, Blackwood, Holcomb called after them. Nobody interferes with my business and lives to brag about it. Wyatt didn't turn around. He led Catherine through the dusty streets toward the saloon where he'd left his horse. Thank you, she said once they were out of earshot of the auction yard. But I think you've just made a dangerous enemy. Wyatt's expression darkened. Holcomb and I were already enemies. He just didn't know it until today. Catherine studied his face. Why did you help me? Why spend your money? Because what was happening back there wasn't right, he replied simply. Then after a pause, "And I need to talk to Holcomb. Privately. This gives me a reason to come back." "You're going back?" Alarm colored her voice. "After I get you somewhere safe." Catherine stopped walking, pulling her arm from his. "I'm not leaving without the others. There are 6 more women in that tent." Wyatt frowned. "I can't buy them all, and I can't shoot my way out with 7 women in tow." "Then we need another plan," Catherine insisted, "because I'm not leaving them to that fate." Looking into her determined eyes, Wyatt saw again that echo of his past, of promises broken and debts unpaid. "All right," he said finally. "But first we need to get you off the street. Holcomb's not the type to honor deals if he thinks he can get away with breaking them." As if to confirm his words, a shout came from down the street, one of Holcomb's men, pointing in their direction. "Run," Wyatt said, grabbing Catherine's hand. "Now!" They fled through the back alleys of Devil's Crossing, the shouts of Holcomb's men growing louder behind them. Catherine struggled to keep pace in her torn dress and impractical shoes, but fear provided ample motivation. "My horse is behind the saloon," Wyatt said, pulling her around a corner. "Can you ride?" "Yes," she gasped. "Boston ladies take riding lessons." He almost smiled at that. "Good, because we'll need to ride hard." When they reached the hitching post, Wyatt's black gelding was where he'd left it. He untied the reins and helped Catherine mount before swinging up behind her. "Hold tight," he instructed, and spurred the horse forward. They thundered down the main street, townsfolk scattering before them. At the edge of town, rifle shots rang out. Wyatt hunched low, pulling Catherine down with him as bullets whizzed overhead. "They're shooting at us," she cried. "Holcomb doesn't like losing property," Wyatt replied grimly, urging the horse faster. They rode hard for an hour, leaving the town far behind. The desert stretched endlessly around them, red rocks and saguaro cacti creating a landscape as beautiful as it was deadly. When the horse began to labor, Wyatt finally slowed their pace. "We should be safe for now," he said. "They won't follow us into the desert without supplies." Catherine sat stiffly before him, her body tense with exhaustion and fear. "What happens now?" "There's a stagecoach station about 10 miles east. We can rest there, get supplies." "And the other women?" Her voice was quiet but insistent. Wyatt sighed. "I'll figure something out." As they rode, Catherine gradually relaxed against him, fatigue overtaking fear. "Why were you really in Devil's Crossing?" she asked. "You don't seem like the type to stumble into a place like that by accident." Wyatt was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "I was looking for Holcomb," he finally said. "Why?" 6 years ago, he ordered the murder of my brother and his family." The flatness in his voice couldn't quite mask the underlying pain. "Took me this long to track him down." Catherine twisted to look at him. "I'm sorry." He nodded once, eyes fixed on the horizon. "What will you do now?" "Get you safely to Tucson, then come back and finish what I started." "You mean kill him?" It wasn't a question, but Wyatt answered anyway. "Yes." Catherine turned forward again. "What about the law?" A bitter laugh escaped him. "There is no law in Devil's Crossing. Holcomb owns the sheriff, same as he owns everything else." "There's a federal marshal in Tucson," she suggested. "Marshals need evidence, witnesses, things I don't have." They fell silent as the horse trudged onward. The sun began its descent, painting the desert in brilliant oranges and purples. "I was going to be a schoolteacher in Silver City," Catherine said suddenly. "My stagecoach was attacked 3 days ago. The men, they killed the driver and another passenger who tried to fight. Took me and 2 other women." Wyatt's jaw tightened. "Holcomb's men," she nodded. "They said we'd fetch good prices. That men out here were desperate for wives." She shuddered. "I never imagined such things happened in America." "The territories have their own rules," Wyatt said. "Not all of them written down." As dusk deepened, a small cluster of buildings appeared on the horizon. The stagecoach station. Lights glowed in windows, promising safety, however temporary. "We'll rest here tonight," Wyatt decided. "Continue to Tucson tomorrow." Catherine nodded, then hesitated. "These people, will they ask questions?" "They might. Let me do the talking." The station keeper was a grizzled old man named Hank, who asked few questions of his customers, especially when one was as notoriously dangerous as Wyatt Blackwood. He provided them with a simple meal and separate sleeping quarters without comment. After Catherine had retired to her room, Wyatt sat alone by the fire, staring into the flames. The detour to Tucson would cost him days, perhaps giving Holcomb time to flee. But he couldn't leave Catherine alone and unprotected, nor could he ignore her plea for the other women. 6 years of single-minded pursuit, and now his path had been diverted by a schoolteacher with stubborn green eyes and unexpected courage. Wyatt wasn't sure whether to be frustrated or impressed. A soft noise made him look up. Catherine stood in the doorway, her face troubled in the firelight. "I can't sleep," she admitted. "Every time I close my eyes, I see that auction block. And the others, still captive." Wyatt gestured to the chair opposite him. "We'll reach Tucson in 2 days. The marshal there is a good man. He'll help. And if he doesn't, then I'll handle Holcomb my way." Wyatt's expression hardened. "And make sure those women go free in the process." Catherine studied him. "You're not what I expected, Mr. Blackwood. Call me Wyatt." Dawn broke cold over the desert. Catherine awoke to find fresh clothes laid outside her door. Men's attire, practical for riding. She changed gratefully, rolling up sleeves and pant legs to fit her smaller frame. Wyatt was already saddling the horse when she emerged. His eyes registered brief surprise at her appearance before returning to his task. "Hank's wife found those," he explained. "Their son joined the cavalry last year. Please thank her for me." Catherine adjusted the too large hat. "I feel almost human again." They set out as the sun cleared the horizon. The day promised heat, but the morning air still carried night's chill. Catherine rode behind Wyatt, her arms tentatively circling his waist. "How did you become a gunslinger?" she asked after they'd ridden in silence for an hour. Wyatt stiffened slightly. "That's not a story for gentle ears. After what I've endured this week, I doubt your story would shock me." He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "My brother Daniel and I were ranchers near Fort Griffin. Had a small spread, nothing fancy, but it was ours." His voice took on a distant quality. "When the war ended, cattle prices dropped. A man named Reeves started buying up struggling ranches. Those who wouldn't sell faced accidents. Like your brother," Catherine guessed. Wyatt nodded. "Daniel refused Reeves's offer. Next week, raiders hit the ranch. Killed Daniel, his wife, their daughter." His voice hardened. "Sheriff said it was Comanches, but Comanches don't leave boot prints." "What did you do?" "Tracked the raiders. 7 men. Killed them one by one." The matter-of-fact way he said it sent a chill through Catherine. Last one confessed Reeves paid them. But by then, Reeves had a new partner, Silas Holcomb. "And Holcomb fled before you could find him," Catherine finished. "Vanished west. Took me 6 years to trace him to Devil's Crossing." Catherine absorbed this in silence. The man before her had killed at least 7 people, likely more. Yet he'd risked everything to save her from the auction block. "I'm sorry about your family," she said finally. Wyatt didn't respond, but his posture relaxed slightly. By midday, the heat had become oppressive. They stopped in the meager shade of a rock formation to rest the horse and eat provisions Hank had provided. "Tell me about Boston," Wyatt said unexpectedly. "What made you leave?" Catherine smiled wryly. "My father's new wife. After mother died, father remarried quickly. His second wife found me inconvenient, so she sent you west. She arranged a teaching position in Silver City, respectable enough that father wouldn't object, far enough that I'd be out of her way." Catherine shrugged. "I was actually looking forward to it, a chance to be useful, independent." "You still can be," Wyatt said. "Once we reach Tucson." Catherine's expression clouded. "If we reach Tucson." Holcomb struck me as a man who doesn't give up easily. "Neither do I." Wyatt checked his pistols, a habit Catherine had noticed whenever he felt uneasy. "We should move. Still a long way to go." They continued their journey through the afternoon, the landscape unchanging in its harsh beauty. Catherine found herself studying Wyatt's profile, the strong jaw, the lines around his eyes that spoke of years squinting into desert sun, the tension that never fully left his shoulders. A killer with a code, a man of violence who'd shown her nothing but respect. The contradiction fascinated her almost as much as it unsettled her. As the sun began to set, they approached a narrow canyon that would lead them to the Tucson road. "We'll camp here tonight," Wyatt decided, guiding the horse to a small clearing sheltered by rocks. Too dangerous to navigate the canyon in darkness. He helped Catherine dismount, her muscles stiff from the long ride. She stumbled slightly, and his hand steadied her, lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you," she murmured, suddenly aware of their proximity. Wyatt stepped back, busying himself with the horse. "I'll gather wood for a small fire. Stay within sight of camp." While he collected brushwood, Catherine arranged their bedrolls and provisions. The domesticity of the task felt strangely comforting after days of chaos. Night fell quickly, the desert cooling rapidly without the sun. They sat beside the small fire, eating jerky and hardtack in companionable silence. "What will you do?" Catherine asked eventually. "After Holcomb, I mean." Wyatt stared into the flames. "Never thought that far ahead. Surely you don't intend to remain a gunslinger forever." "Men in my profession don't often live to retirement age." The blunt assessment saddened Catherine more than she expected. "There must be something else you want from life." "Used to dream of having a ranch again someday," he admitted. "Somewhere quiet. Montana, maybe." "That sounds lovely," Catherine said softly. "Peaceful." Wyatt's mouth twisted in what might have been a smile. "Dreams are cheap, Miss Spencer. Reality costs more." Before she could respond, Wyatt tensed, his hand moving to his gun. "Did you hear that?" Catherine froze, straining to listen. At first, she heard nothing but the crackling fire and the whisper of wind. Then, the distant sound of hoofbeats. "Riders," Wyatt said grimly, dousing the fire with dirt. "At least 3, moving fast. Could be coincidence. Or Holcomb's men," Catherine finished, fear clenching her stomach. "Pack up, quickly," Wyatt commanded, already gathering their few belongings. "We need to move." Catherine worked frantically alongside him, stuffing provisions into saddlebags. "Where can we go? They'll see us on open ground." "The canyon. It's our only chance." Wyatt helped her onto the horse, then mounted behind her. "Stay low and hold tight." They rode into the darkness, the canyon mouth swallowing them into deeper shadow. Wyatt guided the horse carefully over the uneven ground, relying more on instinct than sight. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. "They're following us into the canyon," Catherine whispered, her body tense against his. "Good," Wyatt replied grimly. "Narrows their advantage." The canyon walls rose steeply on either side, pale stone ghostly in the faint moonlight. The path twisted and turned, sometimes barely wide enough for the horse to pass. Wyatt kept their pace slow, knowing a stumble could prove fatal. A rifle shot echoed through the canyon, the bullet ricocheting off stone well behind them. Their pursuers were shooting blind, hoping for a lucky hit. "There's a widening ahead," Wyatt murmured close to Catherine's ear. "A side passage that doubles back. We can set up an ambush." She nodded, trusting his judgment despite her fear. When they reached the spot, Wyatt dismounted quickly and helped Catherine down. He led the horse a short distance into the side passage, tying it where it wouldn't be immediately visible. "Stay with the horse," he instructed, checking his guns. "If I don't come back in 10 minutes, follow this passage. It'll take you to the Tucson road." Catherine caught his arm. "Be careful." The simple concern in her voice gave Wyatt pause. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had worried about his safety. "I will." He melted into the shadows, positioning himself behind an outcropping where the canyon narrowed again. Minutes passed in tense silence. Then came the sounds of approaching riders, moving cautiously. Wyatt counted 3 distinct hoof patterns. 3 men, not impossible odds. They appeared around the bend, silhouettes against the slightly lighter backdrop of the canyon entrance. Wyatt recognized Holcomb's foreman, Fletcher, in the lead. The other 2 were hired guns from the auction yard. "They gotta be here somewhere," one man muttered. "Trail leads straight in." "Spread out," Fletcher ordered. "Check those side passages. Holcomb wants the woman back and Blackwood dead." As the men separated, Wyatt made his move. He stepped into the path of the nearest rider, gun already drawn. "That's far enough." The man reached for his weapon, but Wyatt was faster. The shot echoed through the canyon as the man tumbled from his saddle. The other 2 opened fire immediately. Wyatt ducked behind a boulder, bullets chipping stone around him. He waited for a pause in the shooting, then leaned out to fire twice in quick succession. One bullet found its mark. The second hired gun clutched his chest and fell. Fletcher had taken cover behind his skittish horse. "Blackwood," he shouted, "this doesn't have to end with both of us dead." "Surrender then," Wyatt called back. A harsh laugh. "Not what I meant. Give us the woman. You ride free. Holcomb's business is with her, not you." "Why?" Wyatt demanded, genuinely curious. "What's so special about her?" "Ask her about the documents," Fletcher replied. "The ones she stole before running." Wyatt's mind raced. Catherine hadn't mentioned any documents. The momentary distraction nearly cost him his life. Fletcher had used the conversation to change position and suddenly appeared at the edge of Wyatt's cover. Gun raised. Both men fired simultaneously. Wyatt felt the burn of a bullet grazing his side, but his own shot was truer. Fletcher staggered backward, a red stain spreading across his chest. Wyatt approached cautiously, gun still trained on the dying man. "What documents?" he demanded. Fletcher coughed, blood staining his lips. "Ledger. Shows everything. Every girl. Every buyer. Every bribe." His eyes glazed. "Kill you both for it." Those were his last words. Wyatt searched the bodies, finding nothing of note except ammunition and a wanted poster with his own face on it. The bounty was substantial, $1,000 dead or alive. He returned to Catherine, who waited anxiously with the horse. "It's done," he said simply. She sagged with relief, then noticed the blood on his shirt. "You're hurt." "Just a graze." Wyatt winced as she examined the wound. "We need to talk. Fletcher said something about documents you took." Catherine stiffened. "I was going to tell you when we reached Tucson. Tell me now." She reached into her shirt and withdrew a small leather-bound book. "I found this in Holcomb's office while they were preparing us for the auction. It records everything. The women they've kidnapped, the men who bought them, the officials they've bribed." Her eyes met his. "It's evidence, Wyatt. Real evidence against Holcomb and everyone involved." Wyatt took the ledger, leafing through pages of damning information. Names, dates, amounts, all carefully documented. The work of a man who never expected his records to be seen by the law. "This is why he's so desperate to find you," he realized. "This could hang him, and dozens of others," Catherine added, "including a judge in Tucson." Wyatt closed the book. "Then we can't go to Tucson. Not yet." "Where then?" "Prescott, territorial capital. We take this straight to the governor." His expression hardened. "No more trusting local law that might be in Holcomb's pocket." Catherine nodded. "Prescott is further, at least 4 more days' ride." "We'll make it," Wyatt assured her. "But we should move. Holcomb will send more men when these don't return." They mounted and continued through the canyon, emerging onto open desert as first light appeared on the horizon. By unspoken agreement, they paused to watch the sunrise paint the landscape in gold and crimson. "Beautiful," Catherine murmured. Wyatt found himself looking not at the sunrise, but at her profile, gilded in dawn light. "Yes," he agreed quietly. She turned, catching his gaze. Something passed between them, an understanding perhaps, or something deeper that neither was ready to name. "What happens after Prescott?" Catherine asked. "After Holcomb faces justice?" Wyatt considered the question. For 6 years, vengeance had been his only purpose. Now, holding evidence that would ensure Holcomb's legal punishment, he found himself contemplating a future beyond revenge. "Montana's still there," he said. "That ranch I mentioned." Catherine smiled. "It sounds wonderful." "It could be," Wyatt agreed, surprising himself with the implication in his words. As they rode westward toward Prescott, Wyatt realized the weight he'd carried for 6 years had lightened. Justice for his brother would come through the law, not his gun. And somewhere beyond justice, perhaps there waited something he'd never dared hope for. Redemption, and a chance to build rather than destroy. Beside him rode a woman whose courage matched his own, whose presence made him consider possibilities long abandoned. The desert stretched before them, harsh but beautiful in the morning light. And for the first time in years, Wyatt Blackwood rode toward a future rather than a past.